Greetings and welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to be going through not the discography, but ranking the albums of Swedish black metal band Cethereal. Yeah, they're a band that I feel gets a bit hard done by out of all those Swedish bands. They sort of get lumped into that Dark Funeral, that sort of mid-period Marduk when it was all about the blasting. And I think they've got more to offer, and musically they're a lot better than what those bands were doing. I'm a massive Marduk fan, but they definitely went through that mid period where musically not much was going on. I didn't think anyway. And Dark Funeral, nothing against those guys at all, but I just think Cethereal were like a way better band in that period of Swedish black metal. You know, that very fast sort of violent style, which became very popular in the mid-late 90s, heading into the early 2000s. Yeah, so I'll just be going through. They've only got 6 full lengths, so it won't be a long video, that's for sure. But yeah, enjoy. So up first and in last spot, I have their final album, Ekpyrosis. I really enjoy this album. It's definitely their most experimental. Riff wise, I can hear sort of more like what, say, Thorns and maybe, you know, Grand Declaration of War sort of era Mayhem were doing. There's just that sort of more modern slant on the black metal style that they hadn't really touched upon before. Yeah, I mean, obviously when listening to their earlier material, you know, they really got stuck in that sort of traditional fast blasting Swedish black metal that, you know, was really sort of defined that era in Swedish black metal. But this is definitely different, you know, and like I said, they're most experimental. A lot of discordant sort of riffing and stuff like that. A more clinical, digital sounding production, and yeah, so it is a good album. It's definitely not my favorite, obviously, because it's coming in last, but it's definitely not a bad album at all, and it sort of breaks things up style wise in the whole Cethereal discography, I think. But you know, for some people it might be, you know, right up their alley, you know, if they're not into that earlier style. But for me, it's sort of yeah, I prefer the earlier material over that last album. But definitely, if you're interested, pick it up. I think it's a worthwhile album, that's for sure. And up next, in 5th spot, I've gone for the Death Triumphant album. This one's a bit more sort of direct and streamlined, a lot warmer production. I can hear a lot more sort of Morbid Angel influence in this one. It's just got that sort of, yeah, Morbid Angel vibe to it, which they never really had any sort of death metal influences previously on their albums. They were always going for that, you know, ultra fast, but like the guitar style was very sort of thin and rough sounding. This has got a smoother, warmer sort of tone to it. I think it works on this one. I really like this one. Definitely like it a lot more than Ekpyrosis, but still, it's got nothing on the earlier stuff. But as a whole, I really do like this album. I think the experimentation with, you know, some more death metal influences, and even production wise, it's a lot more yeah, like I said, warmer, and just yeah, and I think just songwriting wise, there's no sort of not everything's just really direct. There's not a lot of filler sort of stuff going on. It's just, yeah, a lot more streamlined version of Cethereal than the first 4 albums. So yeah, I definitely rate Death Triumphant. I think it's a really cool album. Yeah, so check it out. And up next, we have the Hell Eternal album from 1999. I'm pretty sure, yeah, 99. I was actually listening to this last night. I gave it a really good listen. It was an album back in the day that you know, I would hear a lot of things about. Even, you know, my friends really enjoyed this album, and it just didn't do it for me back then. It was like, I don't know, there was just something about it. I think it's the production. I think it's one of the worst Abyss productions, sort of smack bang in that period where every band in Sweden or Norway or whatever was going and using Abyss. Anyone who knows me knows I like to complain and whinge about Abyss productions, but we'll take the first album, for instance, by Cetherial Nord. That's an Abyss production, and they got their own sound. In that period, he was sort of, bands were getting more of their own sound, and things didn't sound so, production line like, So in that period, just a lot of the productions coming out of Abyss were, sounding incredibly, similar. So yeah, I think that affects this album for me. Definitely did in the past. But just listening to it last night, I thought there was like a lot of really good material on it, some really great riffs. Like some of their other albums, especially Lords of the Night Realm, they like to overuse the word Satan. Obviously, I wasn't bored enough to just go through and count them all, but from what I could hear, it was pretty often they used the word Satan. So I was pleasantly surprised last night. Hell Eternal is not an album I tend to reach for a lot, but in preparation for doing this ranking, I wanted to go through the albums again and sort of to see if anything changed. I was probably going to have this in a lower spot, maybe switching with Death Triumphant, but after listening to it last night, I was like, no, there's some really cool stuff on here. And I think it just edged out Death Triumphant for the fourth spot. I think with a better production or even a better Abyss production, it would have allowed the material to shine through a bit better. But, they got what they got. And I think there's some good stuff on here that's sort of ruined by a crappy production. But that's it. Number 4, Hell Eternal. And in third spot, we have End Time Divine from 2003. This album's, quite a grower, or was a grower for me. At the time, I didn't listen to it when it came out. I'd sort of gone off the whole sort of Swedish black metal thing at that stage. It just got all pretty boring for me at that period of time. It's only sort of been like the last 5 years when I've been going back and listening to a lot of that stuff and just really enjoying it. I sort of overlooked a lot of those bands back then, thinking it was just very boring and all that sort of stuff. But no, there's some really cool stuff in that period. I was just in a different headspace. I was listening to a lot of different music, and when it came to black metal, I was just not really interested in that ultra fast stock standard Swedish black metal. But no, End Time Divine sort of as I was getting my Cetherial discography, like the CDs and stuff, obviously I had the older material, but I sort of decided to pick up some of these sort of middle albums. And I didn't really have any expectations for End Time Divine. And it's turned out to be like one of their better ones. That, coming off the back of Hell Eternal, it's very, I think this is the point where they started to get a bit more streamlined in their songwriting, cutting off all the fat and just trying to make the songs as, coherent and compact without it being just boring and straightforward, but just getting rid of any unnecessary sort of riffs. Everything on this album flows really well, and the biggest improvement is on the production from Hell Eternal. Yes, it's still at Abyss, but whatever they did, I think it might have been Tommy Tagren who done it on this. I'm not sure if he did Hell Eternal as well. I thought it was Peter, but either way, the production has improved. Yes, it's still an Abyss production, but I think there's like a separation between the instruments on this one, particularly the guitars. Hell Eternal had the sort of everything was blended in. You know, you had to really fight to understand what was going on, and better separation between guitars and drums. You know, there's a bit of room to breathe, whereas the drums were quite hidden in the mix in Hell Eternal. Also, another improved drum performance from Mysterious, who took over the drums on Hell Eternal. He was previously the guitar player, and him and Lord Craft have been the main guys in the band. But he's still the main songwriter, although taking over the drum duties. So yeah, End Time Divine gets my third spot. It's definitely an album of Cythereal's that I reach for quite a bit. I think it's got great songs, improved production from the previous album, and like I said, just they were really hitting their stride songwriting wise, and just yeah, there was just no filler at all. So yeah, not breaking any boundaries or anything like that, but just for what it was. And when you think of like a band like Dark Funeral or what Marduk were doing back then, these guys, I think were smashing them. So yeah, really cool album. I definitely recommend End Time Divine. All right, so my number 2 is Lords of the Night Realm. So this album, coming off the back of the Nord album, was quite surprising. I think the people who were expecting like a Nord Part 2 were incredibly disappointed with this one. Nord having a lot of atmosphere, and this one just being a brutal, violent, chaotic sort of album. I can still hear the elements of what was going on with Nord. Nord to me was a very while it was atmospheric, there was a lot going on riff wise. I wouldn't say like it's technical black metal. It's just a lot of involved riffing going on. The arrangements are all over the place, but incredibly well structured, and just it makes sense. And this is the same, but just no keyboards really. It's just incredibly violent and just a brutal black metal album. So they didn't really continue on, from what they would, they definitely didn't do a Nord Part 2, that's for sure. So yeah, I remember this album. I got this when it came out, and me being the young person that I was back then, of course I was incredibly disappointed with it because it wasn't Nord Part 2. But over the years I've really come to appreciate it a lot. I think I appreciate the fact that they didn't they went to a different studio. They got like a different sound than some other bands were going for at that time. It didn't sound like the previous album. And yeah, it's just a really, really violent, chaotic album. Great riffs, great drums. Just when I put it in comparison with what other Swedish bands were doing at the time, what was this, 1998? I think you had like Vibiscum Satanas from Dark Funeral, and maybe Nightwing from Marduk. And of course there's other bands in Sweden than those two who I keep mentioning, but we're talking about the big boys, who are putting out albums that I don't think held a candle to this. But still, Cythereal tended to get lumped into that second division black metal. Of course they weren't an Emperor or a Dissection or anything like that, but they were still putting out albums and material that I thought was way better than some of the bands that were getting a lot of attention and a lot of just people were just banging and hyping other bands, and these guys were just flying under the radar. And they probably got lumped into that, what was going on in Sweden, just with the whole ultra blasting black metal. They're an easy target, I'd say. Yeah, but I can't fault this album. I think it's great for what it is, in that ultra fast black metal style. It's one of the best examples of that style. it's not about really atmosphere on this one. Yeah, it's got some atmospheric riffs and whatever, but it's just incredibly violent and fast, and a brutal black metal album. So yeah, if that's what you're into, or you haven't heard the Lords of the Night Realm album, definitely check it out. You won't regret it. And of course, the number one spot goes to 1996's Nord. Yes, I'm going to have to show the glary CD. There we go. Yeah, I mean, I got this album when it came out. It was pretty mind blowing at the time. It was it was an album I didn't really grasp for a while because there was so much going on with it. It was really a lot of riffs going on. But originally, before I'd even heard it, there was this glowing review in Terrorizer of all magazines, and they gave it like a 4.5 out of 5. And at that time, there wasn't many black metal albums that were getting that, higher of a review in such a magazine. And yeah, the record shop that I used to go to in my town, they had all the black metal stuff. And of course, I saw this there and grabbed it. And I mean, straight off the bat, the album as a whole took a while for me to get into, but I absolutely love the opening track. I mean, it's an absolute classic, even to this day. It's 12 minutes long. It doesn't lag at all. All the riffs just flow together. It's one of the most perfect black metal songs ever. I've heard a lot of comparisons with Nord. Not to In the Night Side Eclipse, but it's definitely got those vibes, and you can hear it. I think it's more to do with those floating synths in the background that they have occasionally. They're not used all the time, but when they're very effective when they do use them. This album, obviously being their first, I don't think they've, touched this. But also in the whole grand scheme of their discography, they've never done an album like it. And I think doing such a monumental album, to begin with, where could you go after doing this? There's not really much, so that obviously makes sense why they went in the more brutal direction, the more like violent sort of thing that they did on Lords of the Night Realm and subsequent albums. But yeah, I mean, this album and like the first 3 albums, they're very early Napalm Records releases. I've mentioned it before in podcast episodes about how, Napalm Records, back in the mid 90s, they were putting out some really classic stuff, like the Cetharial albums, the early Abagor stuff, Summoning, Nastrond, Unpure. And then you think to where they are these days, like this, they're up there with like, Nuclear Blasts and Metal Blades and stuff like that, and have all these big bands on their label. And then you've got, you look back to these albums and think about those times when, hardly anyone knew about these bands, especially in my town and circle of friends. I had friends who were into metal music, but they wouldn't touch any of this black metal stuff. But anyway, getting back to Nord, it's pretty mind blowing to think about it. Being their first album, it's just riffs. There's nothing else to say. Incredibly well written stuff for such a young band. There's just a maturity about the songwriting, which you get some bands and they don't even reach this. Well, they will never reach this level of songwriting ever in their whole career. But some bands won't even get to this level after like 10 albums. So yeah, in a way they've released what I consider a classic. But I think when you do that, everything gets judged to that. So they were sort of on a hiding to nothing after this album. And I think that's where some of their detractors, like to put the boot in back in the day, because nothing they could do would ever compare to Nord. So yeah, obviously, if you're watching this, you've heard this album. I think it's being re-released by it's had a couple of reissues, but there's a recent upcoming one now through Soul Seller. And everything I've received from Soul Seller, they did like the Eternus reissues and stuff like that, and they've been great. Vedbun's End as well. So I really can't wait to get this on vinyl. I know there's been a few other vinyl pressings, but yeah, I look forward to the Soul Seller one because I know that they'll do a good job, and hopefully it doesn't sell out. But yeah, I'll pick that up. So yeah, not much to say about Nord. You know, that hasn't already been said. Total classic, 9.5 out of 10 for me. And yeah, so that sort of wraps up the Cythereal ranking. And you know, obviously no surprise with what came in at number 1. And yeah, I thank you for checking this video out. I'll see you next time.